Okay, and we're live. So welcome everyone to this Sifted and Deal Room co-production. Today's event is part of the European Startups project that's also supported by the European Commission and the European Parliament. I'm Yoram Wijngaarde, by the way. I'm the founder of Deal Room and giving a keynote on this event. Today's event is about building tech ecosystems in a distributed world. So a distributed world means people can work from anywhere. It means that events like this are possible. And today's audience have signed up from over 70 countries. And our panelists will be tuning in all the way from LA to Las Vegas, Georgia, London, all across Europe, and even Singapore, where it's already getting late in the evening. So what impact will this new level of distribution have on tech ecosystems as we know them? Do we need to look at the world differently and build tech ecosystems differently? So we've split this event into 4 panels to explore these questions. But first, I'm going to briefly set the stage. So how to deal with the K-shaped recovery? K-shaped meaning part of the economy seem to be really profiting and other parts of the economy are really suffering. In other words, the world is in shambles, but tech is doing better than ever. So tech is doing better than ever. For example, the Nasdaq composite is now 17 trillion. There are now several trillion-dollar companies. They're all from the US, by the way. And here in Europe, we find this a little bit intimidating, actually. But not to worry, because the combined value of European tech now also exceeds 1 trillion. If you just look at companies founded since 2000, so in the internet age. There's been an explosion of unicorns globally. There are now 1,300 unicorns, of which 900 are still private and around 750 are still VC-backed. So what's driving all this? 2 things really. So one is digital acceleration and the other is investor risk appetite increasing. Digital acceleration resulting in revenues accelerating. And risk appetite is that investors are also more willing to take a long-term view and invest at higher multiples. So you have probably seen a version of this chart, and I think it's very telling. So Zoom is worth more than all airlines combined. And I think this event is the answer why. But it's not just about airlines that are not flying. Zoom is also worth more than most telecom firms. So it's about software and it's about unbundling of the past. Maybe you've seen this chart as well. So Tesla is worth more than the top 10 car manufacturers in the world without any marketing budget, by the way. So does that make any sense? Well, so I could present another 20 slides talking about things like network effects and charging networks, but we still wouldn't know the answer. The important point here is that the business world is turning upside down and nobody knows what's next. One thing we do know, software is not eating the world, it has already eaten the world. This chart shows, for example, what's happening in food and the food value chain. So food tech companies like Delivery Hero, but also Ocado, DoorDash, Meituan in China, these used to be small companies. They're now worth together more than 400 billion, and they're catching up with the incumbents, food manufacturers and supermarkets. So they're overtaking traditional food players. Now, I could go on and show a lot of charts about e-commerce being 40% of sales, etc. But I think this headline says it all. E-commerce companies buying household name department stores. And this really begs the question, what will small business look like in 5 or 10 years? And how should cities prepare for what's coming? In the US, Amazon is already doing 40% of all US parcel deliveries. And in the meanwhile, more venture capital keeps flowing into the system, both in US, Europe, China, and they're funding the next generation of startups and scale-ups. And finally, even money itself seems to be going digital or virtual, with Bitcoin hitting 1 trillion in valuation. But what about the other side? So jobs. We've seen a very scary unemployment chart in the US, spiking at 16% according to this chart, but actually it seems to be recovering already. Europe's economy is a big question mark. So we didn't have this huge spike because the government stepped in and furloughing employees and other things. Those things will expire, and so we don't know what's going to happen. But what we do know is that tech is now the most resilient job growth engine. So tech is more important for job growth now and in the future than ever. This is a very interesting chart because it shows that in the US, 10% of jobs are coming from VC-backed tech companies. That includes companies like Amazon, but also a long tail of other VC-backed companies. In Europe, we're only at 1%. So only 1% of all jobs are at VC-backed tech companies. And we need to bring that up to make the economy more resilient. And it's about more than just jobs. BioNTech, which is a German company founded by Turkish immigrants, was one of the first to create a COVID vaccine and is one of the most widely distributed vaccines. They demonstrate the importance of doing tech, and they also highlight the role that the government can play, because for the first 10 years of its existence, it was almost entirely funded by the European Union. So there's more that tech can do. It's curing diseases, fixing healthcare, tackling global warming, working on food sustainability, making industry more competitive. So what about the distributed world? How should we now think about building tech ecosystems? So first point to make is that distribution isn't a new phenomenon. I took these points from a blog post by Kim Mai Cutler, who is going to actually join the next panel. And she made a couple of really interesting points. First of all, the Bay Area topped out roughly in 2014, at least by analyzing portfolio data from Initialized Capital, where Kim Mai works. But the story behind it is actually in the 2008 banking crisis. At that time, Bay Area was cheap and there was a lot of talent. But by 2014 already, so within 6 years, the rising cost of living and a dominant presence of big tech forced younger startups to begin spreading out. We also know that venture capital itself has already gone global. So investment in Europe and Asia is starting to catch up with the US, and most venture capital firms are investing globally already. But COVID did change things, and it did accelerate trends. So this is again from Kim Mai's post, where they did a survey with their portfolio companies, and I thought this was super interesting. So before COVID, founders were asked where they would like to set up their startup, and almost half said San Francisco Bay Area. Post-COVID, the answer was 40% distributed or remote, with San Francisco being the next one at 28%. So that's a big change. And you've seen probably cities like Miami that smell an opportunity. And here on the left, you can see a billboard placed by the government or the mayor of Miami in San Francisco. We've seen this also in Europe already, with Berlin advertising in London, which happened during Brexit. Some countries take a different approach, and that's maybe considered healthy competition, I would say. So if you look at the Baltics, for example, which are 3 small states in Eastern Europe, they actually rank at the top. If a ranking done by Index Ventures called Not Optional, where they look at how stock options are being treated and how they are being taxed. And so these 3 very small countries have made themselves actually a top destination in Europe for working from anywhere. And it's not only this, they've also shown a very progressive attitude with cryptocurrencies and visas and other things. So this is the healthy type of competition that countries will now be engaging more with. A great other example of an emerging tech ecosystem is right next to the Baltics is Poland. This chart shows VC investment in Polish startups, and you can see that the investment in the last 2 years alone dwarfs all the investment that happened before that. And we can show, Poland is just one example. We can show similar stories everywhere. And partly what has been driving that is not only COVID, which might accelerate that, but it's also because it's been shown that big tech companies are already being founded from anywhere. UiPath is the 30 billion RPA company that's now moved largely to New York, but it was founded in Romania. And it was founded already, I think, like 10 years ago. But there's more. There is TransferWise, which is now called Wise, Bolt, Grammarly. Lots of big companies are being created in Central and Eastern Europe. And in fact, the value of startups out of Central and Eastern Europe has gone up 60 times now to 60 billion. And again, similar things are happening in Asia, Latin America, and also Africa. So far setting the stage for today. I'm now gonna hand over to Michael Stothard, who is a former correspondent at the Financial Times and now an editor at Sifted, our partner. And he's gonna talk with an excellent group of people that I'm really excited to hand over with. And they're gonna talk about how to deal with the K-shaped recovery. So thank you for listening.